Yeah.
That's what it always does.
I asked you for 16.
I know.
But
Well, hopefully everyone can hear us. We're now my mic is a little higher now. Put it up. But yeah, we're glad everybody is
you
Start.
yeah.
You address my.
Wait, did you our guy out there?
Yeah, who's that? Oh,
Yeah. I want to make sure he got to meet you for the men's club.
oh, is he on my email list?
I don't think so. That's why I wanted you to talk to him.
Oh, no, I think so.
So what? Yes. Before we start, John wants to say something
I know.
on behalf of America.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm inundated with some stuff. Like,
Yes.
It's very frustrating.
Yes.
The Richmond Council,
Yes.
it's getting out of hand.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, you said to me too.
It's getting out of hand.
Well, that's the Richmond City Council
Yeah,
from
but
up in the Bay Area, Richmond.
there's one, then another, and then another, and then another.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many they've been. It doesn't matter. It's one. Well, what are you gonna do? Boycott Richmond? I mean, what are you gonna not do in Richmond? No, I mean it sucks, but I don't mean to say we're not gonna do anything about it. But look, I mean, what do you do? Honestly, I mean, you say, hey, I don't want to be in this city anymore. I personally wouldn't want to be in Richmond anyways, just so you know.
There's the Texas Rangers and the Houston.
Oh, so wait a second. This guy Sheldon's just telling me that it's the Rangers, the American League had Ian Kinsler. He's not from Israel. He's from Team Israel.
No, he's from Team.
Yeah, he used to be on the Rangers. Yes, he's a good guy. But he's a what story?
A friend of mine, he's from Toronto,
Yeah.
nice Jewish man. He posted a story
Yeah.
about a young man that was at the concert or the music festival in Israel on October 7th.
Yeah.
And when the shooting started, his friend said, run, run, run. And he said, no, because he's a trained paramedic. His ambulance was there and he wanted to stay and help people.
Mm-hmm.
He was shot and killed.
Yeah.
He was an Israeli Arab.
Yeah. Yeah. They talked about a little bit about that. We're going to start spotlighting the Arabs who've been affected by this too. But you know what? It's like for people in Richmond, for people who don't care, I had somebody call me today saying they were crying as they were watching what was going on in New York today. People marching through New York saying death to the Jews.
Mm-hmm. Article a cousin of mine posted also today is, I forgot what school it was, but there's a school where there was a group of young Jewish people in the library that couldn't get out.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because,
New York, yes.
there were pro-Hamas demonstrators in front of the library. They called the police. The police said, we can't do anything about it.
Why?
They snuck out the back door. I don't know why.
I mean, have you seen NYPD? They didn't want to. They can't do anything.
Yeah, there's definitely we said there's two fronts to this war. One of them is in Israel, and the other one, that's the dangerous one, obviously. But we have one here that's also dangerous.
Yes.
It also requires us to be ready. Could be, but it's not. I mean, wait, yeah, but I want to be careful because you say there's two fronts. You want to. I mean, there's a front where people are about to die, but it's dangerous though. It's just not.
Migrants we brought in.
Jesse, it's definitely dangerous, but again, I don't want to minimize. I that's why I say there's two fronts. One of them is really, really tough, and then ours is also a front. Though it's a war. I don't think that had to do with this. No, there's no Jews in Maine. No, there are some. Actually, my daughter was there visiting last week, but she was not.
There are no Jews in
Rachel was in Portland. They went up to Maine. Anyways, no, there are Jews in Maine. Actually, Judith's sister-in-law lived there for a while. But yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's another front. But again, we're not gonna go away during this time, right? So somebody asked me recently about my trip, about going there, And I went through, they said, I understand you want to give the money directly to the people, but come on, you could send it to them and you could Zelle to a person there or whatever and make sure it got there. I said, yeah, but partly it's because we want to be able to make sure that the Israelis see that non-Orthodox Jews in America are standing with them, especially, again, look, people know I don't talk about myself. I don't refer to myself as a Reform rabbi a lot. That doesn't really matter to me that much. But Honi is there right now. I mean, he was already going there. But there are a lot of Orthodox Jews. I just saw Shmuley Botach there from every, whatever, all media stuff he does, but he was there this last week. Look, they know Israelis know that the Orthodox Jews in America are more, they have more political leanings with them. I personally think, in my anecdotal research in life, the average Reform or conservative Jew is much more pro-Israel by nature than their rabbinic leadership. The problem in the non-Orthodox world is that Reform rabbis and conservative rabbis have become disproportionately apologetic for Israel, and beyond that, that's a euphemism. They've become, quite frankly, in some cases, downright anti-Israel. And so it's real important in this situation for people to see that a Reform rabbi, a rabbi of a Reform synagogue, whatever you want to call, is going to be going to Israel and to be there with the people, because, again, the Orthodox folks are there. So that's one of the other reasons why this is important. And that's why I said, it's important for people there in Israel to see that it doesn't matter. So there's a little bit of compensation there that I'm doing for that, because I have not seen in the last few days many non-Orthodox rabbis going to Israel or standing. I mean, they've been not avoiding their responsibility, but some are not doing a whole lot to make a noise. I don't know there would have been a rally in Santa Clarita if I hadn't done that.
I don't think so. You did it.
We will say that might not have happened otherwise, but and I didn't do it for that reason. But when I look back on it now, I said, well, but and there's a lot of reasons why I'm going there. I've had a few people call me during this last couple of weeks and saying, if your dad was alive, he'd be there right now. And he would have been. So there's part of that too. Part of it's a legacy that I take seriously and know that, that's the way I was raised. So that's another issue too. That has to do with my family responsibility. But anyways, lots of reasons too. But
Your dad's a musician.
yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, but I'm not a vinyl guy, so I have boxes of, I'm trying to find the right library to give my dad's record collection to.
Well, I bet it's some record collection.
Yeah, it's important because there's albums there that it's probably the only album in America.
When he was on the radio show, it was all his music. Right?
Yeah, there was all his albums. I mean, he bought them. He'd go to Israel. He'd bring them back. He'd have other people bring them back. So he had a huge vinyl collection, because that's why my dad started, was on the radio.
Every Sunday morning.
Yep. So that's what he did. And so I have those albums. I don't know that they're all there, but I have like 9 boxes of vinyl that I was going to get him to UCLA, and then UCLA wasn't sure that they could do it. That was during COVID. I mean, my dad passed during COVID, so that's how I wound up with him in 2020. But yeah, I'm trying to find the right home for them where they'll be properly.
They weren't.
Well, no, I don't think the show effect, because it's not just, I mean, it's not really Holocaust related, but UCLA has a Jewish music department. Yeah. It's the Milken Archive. It's not Michael Milken, it's Lowell Milken, actually, his brother. Yeah. His brother endowed that. So the Milken Archive at UCLA, I think, would potentially be a good repository. The issue is that, again, everything gets complicated. It's like, well, we don't have the resources to maintain it. And, we need to raise money to be able to take. I'm like, I'm giving them to you. You don't need any money. Just take it. Yeah, but we have to hire somebody to archive it and take care of it and maintain it. I'm like, oh, please, so that would be good. That's where he went. He'd love for it to be at CSUN, but he was in CSUN. No, he never did. He didn't do KCSN. No, he was on a few stations in LA, but he was on KIV 870. He was on KISS FM, not KISS. Wasn't KISS. It was KUTE, Cute 102, which was 101.9. But yeah, I used to go to the station with him every week, and we would, I would go to these stations. A lot of them were in Glendale, Burbank and Glendale. There's where a lot of the radio stations are. That was part of my life. Every Sunday morning, going to the radio station and listening to this music, which was Yiddish music, Israel music, Jewish comedy, and
Big John. That's the first time I ever heard Big John was on your dad's radio station. Never understood why he had it on his station, but it was great.
Yeah, there was, but that was, a lot of comedy. Mickey Katz, Myron Cohen. These were people that, like I'm probably the youngest person who's ever heard of these people, but they were great. It was great stuff. And that's, but I used to listen to like 2,000-Year-Old Man. I mean, I was raised on 2,000-Year-Old Man. So it was funny when, people started rediscovering it. Yeah. I think I asked him to. I think it was mainly me telling him, please play that. Anyways, a lot of good memories. Tough to think about it being 40, 50, 45 years ago. But anyways, yeah, we're for him. But that's when I was going there, when I was a kid, when I remember it. I was 45.
I was pretty young when I started listening.
Yep. Anyways, I can only imagine what he would have said about what's going on right now. Glad he didn't have to live to see this. A lot of our family, I'm glad that they didn't have to see this. Anyways, so where we left off last week in chapter 25, we were talking about people who had to take over their family by marrying their sister-in-law. And the fact that the Bible actually gives us an out for that, which is called the ritual of chalitza. And that's what we read about. But it's kind of a humiliation. If you read the Torah on this, it's kind of like, well, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. But clearly, once people didn't have tribal situations where it made a big difference that the tribe still had that guy's name, it became less and less of something that people felt bound to do. That's kind of what we left off with. And again, when it says your brother's house, it doesn't literally, of course, mean building their house, because in those days, a lot of their houses were tents, especially early biblical times. But a house is their family, their last name, if you will. That's their house, the house that they're known by. The house of Lannister, the house of whatever you want to call it, whatever the house was, and it was your favorite house on Game of Thrones. That's what it is. It's not literally a house. It doesn't have to be a building. It's your family. So that's where we left off. And then today we started with something that I did show you last week, which was this crazy, crazy law that if two parties are fighting, one man with another, and the wife of one of them comes up to save her husband from his antagonist and puts out her hand and seizes him by his genitals, you shall cut off her hand, show no pity. Now, that sounds pretty tough. And as you can see, the word there, show no pity, seems to imply that, yeah, that's pretty tough. Now, I will tell you that the way the rabbis understood this, and there's a lot of different commentaries, you can see there's a lot of commentary, give you one right here. Let me show you actually a Talmudic passage. I mean, Rashi says on it, you shall cut off her hand. It is, she must pay money that is equivalent to the shame which she has been put, again, and he's referencing the Talmud, which basically says you don't cut off her hand. It's a monetary penalty. At least it was by the rabbinic period. Was it ever something that they actually did? Probably, because it does seem like it's a very tribal kind of law, which is, this is the ultimate humiliation that somebody could have, is for some woman that you're fighting with, or her husband, you're fighting with him, that she grabbed you by your genitals. That's a definitely humiliation, and of course would also hurt. Let me just see if there's any of the Talmudic. Here's the references that we're talking about. This is monetary restitution. Here's another thing here. I want you to see this one. This is the other Talmudic answer. This is referring to a case where she can save him by other means. So if there's no other way for her to save her husband, it's not even a penalty. Yes. So if she could, she's got to pay the price. Then it was not necessary. But if that's the only way she could, the implication here is where she can save him by other means. So if she can't save him by other means, so it's right here. What is not referring to this case where she can't save her husband by any other means. So that's it, where she can save him by other means. So that's what they're talking about. Again, it's definitely talking about a time and a place where this type of behavior or this type of action would be considered very humiliating. And again, most people,
standards too, though.
Yeah, but I think the assumption here is you're literally trying to render this guy so that he can't have children. So taking away this guy's ability to procreate gives you the, that's one of the worst things you could do to somebody, is stop them from procreating. So the penalty has to be pretty hard. And that's what they did. That's what they did with her. You shall not have in your pouch alternate weights, larger and smaller. You shall not have in your house alternate measures, a larger and smaller. You must have completely honest weights and completely honest measures, if you are to long endure on the soil that your God Adonai is giving to you. So these three verses all, of course, go together. This has to do with having true weights and measures. Because again, if you don't have a system where people can trust the way you're doing business, your whole society falls apart. If you're to endure, whenever we see those words in the Bible, we're really being told your society, your life in the world where people rely on each other, community, society, whatever structure of how people do commerce, it falls apart if people can't trust each other. And so you have to have weights, honest weights and measures. Look, we still have that law in this country today. You got people, going around gas stations, checking, making sure that you're getting the right amount of fuel when you pay for your gas. I mean, there's not much in our world today. I also have people that check boxes of cereal and make sure that they're the right, they're the right weight. But, we don't have many places where we look at this today and go, my livelihood depends on getting an honest weight of stuff. But if you're involved in commerce where you're trading your produce, your wheat, you're weighing stuff out for whatever spices in those days, salt, that's money. So we don't even think about it today because almost everything we buy is prepackaged. Everything we have is stamped with a weight, and we don't think about it that much. But for our ancestors, it was something that they dealt with every single day. And so if you go to a shuk, if you go to the market in Israel today, which a lot of people still like to do in Israel, they have people with old time, scales, and they're weighing out bags of spices and fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. People, still engage in weighing stuff out. But yeah, I guess you could say gas is one of those few things that we're looking at that and going, well, that's money. That's every time we see that, that meter tick past us, it's like, did I just pay $6 for gas? But you did. So that's the only way we can have a society, is where people trust that. For everyone who does those things, everyone who deals dishonestly is abhorrent to your God Adonai. So there's another line there, which again is that the people who are doing those kind of things are also God's not happy with them. Now, is it everything that you just read before, or is it just that section here? There's definitely a break right here, because the next lines, or actually, this is the maftir, by the way, for this Torah portion for Kitetse. The last three verses of this Torah portion, 17, 18, and 19. What can I tell you, man? Sometimes we read the Torah and it gives you the shivers, because this section, I had no idea we're going to read this section right now, but we're going to read it. The maftir for Kitetse. This is the way the laws end. 17, 18, and 19. And we actually read this portion just before Purim every year, for what we call Shabbat Zachor, Shabbat of remembrance. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt, how undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march, when you were famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when your God, Adonai, grants you safety from all your enemies around you, in the land your God, Adonai, is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. Now, this is a commandment. We've discussed it before. We've discussed it, of course, every time we read it. We also think about it every time we read this section. But very few times I've read this section and felt like I'm living this right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's two commandments here, folks, a positive and a negative commandment. Remember, that's positive. Zachoret, remember. And then it finishes with a negative commandment. Not in the sense, again, that it's a negative thing, but it's all negative. But lo tishkach, do not forget. So it's said both ways, both in a positive form and a negative form. By positive and negative, you understand the thou shalt nots are called negative commandments. It doesn't mean they're negative. It just means they're phrased in a thou shalt not. By the way, most of the mitzvot, over 50% of the mitzvot, are thou shalt nots. Thou shalls, the positive commandments, there aren't as many of them. I mean, under some calculations, there's 365 negative commandments and 248 positive commandments. But there's a lot less, for sure, no matter what, how you count them, there definitely are in the Bible a lot less positive commandments than negative commandments. And one of the reasons for that is that the Bible doesn't have to usually command us to do certain things, because the Bible doesn't command everything. It doesn't tell us every single thing we're supposed to do. It's pretty much telling us what not to do. And that's really, to some extent, one can make the argument, the purpose of law, not to legislate or to mandate everything we're supposed to do, but to actually tell us what we can't do, what we're not allowed to do, what breaks the social covenant, what breaks the ability for, even in our country, for society to function. So, it's most of the laws are going to be in a negative form, should be in a negative form. You're not allowed to do something. This is now against the law to do this. That's why, again, it's always a little bit more complicated to assert positive rights than to again, legislate what you can't do. Lo tishkach is, again, the do not forget. Now, what's interesting about this commandment, of course, is a lot of people get hung up on the fact that there's a commandment to wipe out the Amalekites. Now, we didn't wipe out the Amalekites, so it didn't happen, though we're the only people in the world that know who the Amalekites were, because we have no evidence that the Amalekites ever existed. There's no reference for them outside of the Bible. They're gone. We did, somebody, somehow, they were wiped out. They're not there. There is no reference to them in Egyptian texts, in Babylonian texts. They are gone. If it was not for the Bible, we'd have no idea. We don't really know what Amalek, like we don't know about them from anybody else. The Edomites didn't write about them, the Moabites, Canaanites, nobody wrote about them. So we don't really know. We only know from where they came from the Bible itself,
Right.
which is that they came from Esau. They are descendants of Esau's line. So that's all we know about, like, how they came about. What we do know is that even though they are descendants of Esau, and technically then more related to us than some of the other tribes and some of the other nations that we would mess around with, including the Ammonites and Moabites, because they're descendants of Lot. They're not descendants of Esau, who's, remember, a son of Isaac, a grandson of Abraham. It's pretty closely related, which means that Amalek is from that line. But it's not who he's related to. It's what he did. It's what they did. It's what the Amalekites did. And again, we read about what the Amalekites did in Exodus chapter 17.
They're the first people to attack.
Yeah. They attacked us as we came out of Egypt. And the story is pretty self, it's pretty, self-explanatory. It says right here in verse 8, chapter 17, verse 8, Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, pick some troops for us and go down to battle. And I'll station myself at the top of the hill and with the rod of God, the staff of God. All right. The mateh, the staff. Joshua did as Moses told him, and they fought with Amalek. While Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But when he lowered his hands, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took a stone under each one, and they supported his arm so they could fight. And Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with a sword. And Adonai said to Moses, inscribe this in a document as a reminder and read it out loud to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Now, yes, what does your note say?
It's actually in Genesis.
Chapter 36.
Verse 7. It says, Amalekites, a tribal people living in the Negev and in the Sinai Peninsula.
Well, look. On their way back, this is the first line about them. It just says the territory of the Amalekites, right?
Yes.
But Genesis chapter 36 is the place where we actually learn who they are. And it says only one line about them, or one phrase. Esau took wives, etc. Esau, the Edomites. And here it says right here, these are the names of Esau's sons, Eliphaz, right? And then it says Eliphaz had sons, right? Teman, Omar. These are basically, by the way, Teman is the Hebrew word for the Yemenites. These are people who basically live in Saudi Arabia and Yemen, Arabia. Then it says Timnah was a concubine of Esau's son Eliphaz. She bore Amalek to Eliphaz, right? That's all it says about how Amalek, came into being. If you look at so it says, there's a little midrash here. This is stated to tell you what importance Abraham was held, how eager people were to attach themselves to descendants. This Timnah was a descendant of the chieftains, as it said, and Lotan's sister was Timnah. So we have another Timnah that's mentioned. So it says, she said to Eliphaz, if I'm unworthy to become your wife, would that I become your concubine? Scripture enumerates her amongst the children of Eliphaz, thus intimating that he took Seir's wife, and from the two of them, Timnah was born. Okay, so what are they talking about? Is this idea that this Timnah, who it says was a concubine, not a full wife of Eliphaz, that she was the one who was the mother of Amalek. What's interesting about that is it's basically saying that Timnah wanted to be as close to the Abraham people as possible, and basically said, I want to be, I'll be your concubine if you won't take me as a wife, which means like she just wanted to be a part of our people. And even if she couldn't be a part of our people, which actually is interesting because they cut out the other part of that midrash. The other part of that midrash was actually that Timnah went to Jacob first and said to Jacob, let me marry one of your kids. And Jacob said, we don't want you. We don't want you. Don't come into our people, Timnah. We only marry from within our tribe. You can marry, my mother's family. We can marry into the people of Abraham. We can't marry you. And so the midrash is that she went to Esau. And Esau's like, well, you're okay, but you're not going to be his wife. You're just going to be his concubine. And so the interesting midrash there is teaching us a lesson, which is that if Jacob hadn't kicked Timnah out, she would have been married into our people and there would be no Amalekites. So that's an interesting midrash, because it basically says we created our own nemesis. We created our own enemy, which is an interesting idea. Because what happens, of course, is Amalek becomes our enemy throughout history. Amalek doesn't ever really disappear. We can't really get rid of them, even though they're not the same Amalekites, but they still exist. So that is why, and I actually took a course on this when I was in rabbinical school. I took a class on Amalek. We looked at all the texts of Amalek in the Bible, and then in the commentary, and then the Talmud, and all the way through to the modern commentaries. So Amalek exists as our eternal enemy. Who is Amalek? Well, anybody who identifies himself as Amalek. Anyone. The first reference to kind of someone being a descendant of Amalek, even though there is no direct evidence for it, is Haman. He's called the Agagite. Now, Agag was one of the Amalekites. He's the king that, again, Saul was commanded to kill all the Amalekites. Samuel told him, that's what God wants you to do. You wipe them out. Well, Samuel was not listened to. Saul kept King Agag alive. And according to tradition, the Bible actually says it, Samuel came in and said, you didn't listen to him. You didn't listen to God. And now God's going to take your throne away and give it to someone else, which will be David. But Samuel then proceeds to cut Agag in two. He slices him up. And Saul was like, whoa, what the hell just happened? Great scene. There's a great visual of that, by the way. They did a version of King David a few years ago, about 20 years ago. And Leonard Nimoy played Samuel. I'll never forget when he picks up his sword and cuts King Agag down. He was not acting very Vulcan in that moment. He was angry Vulcan, if anything. But he played Samuel in that version of David. And that's how David, to some extent, became king, because King Saul didn't fulfill his duties to wipe out Amalek. So, look, we don't know how Haman becomes, how the Amalekites somehow made their way to that point, but we have that tradition. And then, look, Haman's family all get wiped out at the end of the story. All his 10 sons get wiped out, but maybe they had kids and maybe some of them already procreated. We don't know. But the point is that for the rabbis, it's not even a genetic thing. It's not even there's no proof that there's no proof that there's any Amalekite DNA anymore. Because for the rabbis, anybody who rises up to defeat the Jewish people is Amalek. They self-identify by what they do, by trying to destroy the Jewish people. So when, what Amalek did that was so bad was that they attacked us when we came out of Egypt. And according again to what the story just told us back in not here, but in Deuteronomy, what does it say? It says that they attacked the stragglers, the people that were in the rear, which would have been women and children, right? They attacked. What does your translation there say, Glory, for the stragglers in your rear? Verse 18.
$18, 25.
Yeah, 25, 18.
They met you on your journey and cut off all who were lagging behind. They had no fear of God.
Mm-hmm. Undeterred by the fear of God. No fear of God. Lo yirah Elohim. They don't fear God. Not Adonai, just any God. They don't fear God. So they killed the women and children. So it's not the way you go to war against people. And one of the things that the rabbis pointed out a long time ago was that when Amalek attacked us as we came out of Egypt, the portion before talks about how the Egyptian army got wiped out by trying to attack us. And God covered them with the Sea of Reeds in the chapter before. Right? That's chapter 17. 15 and 16 were literally walking across the Red Sea as the Egyptian army, all their chariots got wiped out. And then this band of desert people, the Amalekites, attack us like desert raiders as we're coming through the desert, literally the next chapter. So, of course, what Amalek did was take a people who had just defeated the most powerful army in the world and made them look like anybody could attack them. And so what Amalek did that was so reprehensible is that it basically made them feel like they were completely vulnerable when they shouldn't have been. And so what Amalek does is not just make the Israelites feel like they're vulnerable, but tell everybody else in the world these people are vulnerable. Right? Because they beat the Egyptians, but now they can get beaten by you. So they completely erased the reputation that we had. So because of that, what they did was also terrible, because everybody else who's attacked us since, we're like, well, Amalek can do it. If Amalek can do it, we can do it. So they did that. So back to the other issue. So who is Amalek? Who really is Amalek? Anyone who identifies as Amalek. So Jewish law has always understood that the Amalekites are anybody who are behaving like that. Any group that is committed to destroying the Jewish people is Amalek. They self-identify. So it's impossible to read this. Yeah, it's impossible to read this text without thinking about that. So look, for the last 25 years, people in Israel have said Hamas is 100% Amalek. You can read it. You can't read it because it's not published in the Jerusalem Post, but it's published in Jewish sources. It's published in rabbinic takes on the Torah portion this was just read a month ago in the synagogue, a month and a half ago, end of August, beginning of September is when this was read, Ki Tetzei, was 6 weeks before Hamas attacked. So Hezbollah is Amalek. Iran is Amalek. Anyone, the Nazis were Amalek. Anybody who's bent on destroying the Jewish people becomes Amalek. And therefore, you have an obligation to blot out their memory, to wipe them out. Now, the irony, of course, is that we're the only people who remember Amalek. And in some cases, we're the only people who remember, I mean, we have no evidence that Haman ever existed. We're the only people who remember him. There are a lot of people in history who have, to some extent, we still talk about them because they went to war against the Jewish people, and we remember them. We never forget these people. But their names become part, to some extent, of Jewish history. But more importantly, even if we don't remember their names, we remember what they did, and we remember that we blot them out to some extent by remembering them. So there's this weird kind of like irony, which is, in order to remember them, you have to kind of destroy them, but also once they're destroyed, you have to remember that you've done that, even though, again, the cycle is essentially you can't forget. And that's where again, it exists both as a positive and as a negative commandment. Because if you thought, well, I'll remember that, yeah, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But the follow-up commandment of not forgetting, remember, then you say, well, that's going to really stop me from forgetting. A commandment not to forget. And so it's laid out both ways. I mean, think about it. It's very rare for a commandment in the Bible to be both laid out in the positive and negative, especially within 3 verses of each other. Yeah, it's really hard to read this now without wondering, how is this going to be remembered, 50 years from now, 75 years from now, 1,000 years from now, because it'll be remembered 1,000 years from now. What happened on October 7th? How is it going to be remembered? I'll tell you how it's going to be remembered. I don't know what's going to be remembered because it's still happening. So in all fairness, we don't know. We're in the midst of it right now. But I will tell you this. It will be remembered by the date. It will be remembered as a date. That's how we remember 9/11. Very Jewish thing to do, by the way. We remember 2,500 years later, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. We've never forgotten the date. Tisha B'Av, the holiday of Tisha B'Av, is the 9th of Av. Doesn't mean the day of destruction. It means the 9th of Av. For 2,600 years, we've remembered that date. So my guess, again, we don't know how this is all gonna play out. But my guess is that this is going to be remembered as, it's probably going to be remembered as the 23rd of Tishrei or the 7th of October, but it'll be remembered by that date. If you're thinking about what this is going to be called, that's what it's going to be called. And people might refer to it later on as the Israel-Hamas war, whatever they might call it. Jewish people 1,000 years from now will be calling it the 7th of October. Well, they won't say the 7th of October, say the 23rd of Tishrei, but that's how they'll be remembering it. So we will remember it. People, whatever understanding they take away from what happened, they're going to, we're going to remember that for Israel, who have been, I mentioned it at Yom Kippur. There's not an army that has attacked Israel since 1973. I mean, we go around talking about that all the time. Yes, there were Scud rockets that were launched in Israel during the Gulf War. And yes, there are rockets launched against Israel every year from Hamas. And every 7-8 years, there's a launch of missiles from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. 100%. Israel hasn't been at peace many years in its existence, but no nation has attacked them. Tanks, the modern equivalent of the Egyptian chariots, have not come through, have not made their way across a border of Israel in 50 years. And now Israel is saying, what difference does it make? More civilians died on the 7th of October than the 6-Day War and Yom Kippur War combined. More civilians. I didn't say soldiers. I mean, a lot more soldiers died at the Yom Kippur War. 2,500 Israeli soldiers died in the Yom Kippur War, but not this many civilians. So it's a similar situation where we're literally saying, how is this going to be remembered? How do we make this part of a lesson for future generations? And unfortunately, we're dealing with the same thing, which is that anti-Semitism and the attack on the Jewish people, or trying to eliminate the Jewish people, is been going on for thousands of years. So, we have a responsibility, a mitzvah, to defend ourselves, and we don't forget that. It's interesting. If you look at the mitzvah completely, it says, when God grants you safety from your enemies around you, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek. Now, we understand that to mean that meant when they dealt with all their other things that they had to deal with, then they had to go after Amalek, which is interesting because they're like, well, you got to fight another war. But the war against Amalek is because these people need to be obliterated. And when you take care of the stuff that's at the forefront of this, then you can loop back and deal with Amalek. It's been a problem because Israel has never been able to eradicate in 75 years. They've never, even when they've had peace, even when they've had no attacks, they have not been able to obliterate the undercurrent of anti-Semitism and hatred that exists from their neighbors around them. So how do you do that? So even when they've had, again, a respite from battle, and they should be focusing on blotting out this kind of anti-Semitism and hatred, they can't.
Actually, there's another way to look at it. They've been very successful at blotting it out and becoming successful in spite of all the crap that's gone on in the last 100 years. Yeah, but you're right. So John's point is they've been successful in all the while they've been fighting, and they've been able to build an economy and build this high-tech country and take care of even their enemies to some extent with the technology that they've created for agriculture and for desalinization, all that. Yes. But here's the weird thing. As long as that hatred exists out there, you fight the battles, but the other issue has not gone away. And that's the weird thing for me, is how true that is, that to actually obliterate that type of hatred that exists, I don't know how Israel can do it effectively. It's so ingrained and it's so much a part of the neighborhood that it's a real problem. I mean, it's like, if you want to know what the real problem is, it's that hatred that exists. And again, it's why you can get people, driving through our rally saying, Israel's going down, Allahu Akbar. How does that happen in Santa Clarita? Because it's been ingrained on people around the world who
that's where they're coming from. So Israel defeats the Egyptian army, but can't defeat that. So that's the problem, is we haven't figured out a way to eradicate that type of undercurrent of anti-Semitism.
Maybe survival is is based on their secret weapons.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
We have to survive.
But it also means that you can't forget. Yes, you have to survive, but you also can't forget that that's really what's going on. Because if you're oblivious to that, and you go, well, we're safe and secure right now, then you get a sucker punch like what happened, and you go, well, where did that come from? It came from the fact that these people are just waiting for an opening every single day. Where's it come from? Because that's what they feel. So that's the problem. And that's where, until that's gone away, there's not going to be peace. There's not going to be, Israel will never be secure as long as that's still, as long as that's what the baseline temperature is, it's never going away. And that's what you have to remember. I mean, that's what you take away from this. Is, at the end of the day, Israel does not have an answer for how it's going to protect itself once Hamas is uprooted out of Gaza. Everybody knows. Okay, so then what happens the next day? You met that military obligation, you had to uproot them, but what happens the next day?
They also have to remember that they can no longer think they can give land for peace, because no matter how much land they give, they're not going to get peace.
Yeah, I think most people recognize now, as Joyce said, that Israel has had good relationships with Egypt and Jordan over the last 30 years, 35 years. But the reality is that the hatred that exists for Israel in those cities in the Arab world still exists.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons, folks, why I will not be, and I don't care how much people say, I want to go to, we are not going to Jordan for a while. I am not giving these people $1, just so you know. I'm not going to be complicit. If you want to go to Jordan, go on your own. I'm not taking people there anymore. I'm done. And again, Petra's beautiful. Jordan's got a lot of nice things to see. Not everybody there is a bad person. I know. I don't care. I'm not giving those people money. And they can't condemn, basic. I don't care if they gave messages of support for the Palestinians, but there should have been march. I know it wasn't going to happen. I'm not stupid, but there should have been marches in those countries saying this is not reflective of Islam. This is not reflective of the Arab people. Right. This is an aberration. There was none of that. There was only, this is a great day for our people. This is the beginning of the liberation. That's what you heard on the streets in Amman, and that's what you heard in Egypt. So, look, you saw it. It's not. I wish it wasn't the case, but that's what happened, and that's why Arab Americans in this country were celebrating too. So, like I said, I mean, I don't like to say that. It causes me anguish to say that, but it is what happened, and you saw it with your own eyes in the last 2 weeks. I don't know how much more real it could be than that. So that is our lesson of Amalek in our own day. And I guarantee you that this discussion is going on. I have, I don't know what to tell you about. Look, there's a very fine line to say that Amalek refers to everybody in the Arab world, everyone in the Muslim world. I would not say that. And again, I'm sure there are people who are saying that right now in some of the yeshivas in the world. But anybody who self-identifies as someone who hates the Jewish people, who hates Israel, is self-identifying as Amalek. That's all I can tell you. They are self-identifying. And that's the reality. And again, I'm not saying that everybody is, but if they do, they've self-identified. So, and by the way, the last thing I do want to say about Amalek is that there is this lesson about Amalek that I'd say some of the rabbis give, which is that Amalek also, to some extent, is not necessarily always an external threat, but Amalek also can be an internal aspect of ourselves. So it's not discussed a lot, but it is discussed in some of the more Kabbalistic sources, some of the mystical sources, and even still by some people today who have this understanding that Amalek really, because if you think about it, it could have been us. There's a dark side of us that we have to be careful that Amalek is not part of us, that we haven't internalized some aspect of Amalek within our own selves, both kind of on a spiritual level, but also you could also say on a self-hating level as well. But this is something that we also, I will just say, as a cautionary measure, that we have to be careful that Amalek doesn't exist within our own souls, within our own community. So that is, again, it's the maftir, it's the last verses we read in Ki Tetzei, and considering all the mitzvot, and again, there's over 70 commandments in Ki Tetzei that we've been reading over chapter 22, 23, 24, now through 25. Some very important mitzvot, a lot of life-affirming and beautiful mitzvot as far as, making sure you protect animals, that you protect your families, that you protect, trees, all those wonderful things that we're supposed to do. But here we just finished with a precautionary tale for how we actually still have to survive. So, there you go. Any more comments about Amalek? Let me just see if anybody has responded on. Just got a LA Times story that home invasion suspect reportedly. This is wonderful. Reportedly threatened to kill Jewish family in Studio City, yelled "Free Palestine." That's the LA Times that just reported that. So, is Amalek alive and well in the San Fernando Valley tonight? Yeah. Pretty clear. So, yeah, I had a Gentile friend, a Christian friend, who called me today. He left a message. I haven't even called him back yet. He was crying because he was watching what was going on in New York today. People going down the streets of New York saying, kill the Jews. So that's for everybody to see. What can you say? So, yeah, that's the end of Ki Tetzei. That's the end of that section. And it's really the end of a section of Deuteronomy. This is a good place to start a new chapter, which we do. It's a good place to start a new parsha, which we do. And it's one of the few places where we can actually say in Deuteronomy, oh, this seems to be a natural break from the ideas and the stuff that we've just done over the last few weeks, which is reading a lot of mitzvot, grab bag of mitzvot, a potpourri of mitzvot. And so now as we go to chapter 26, we read Ki Tavo. And this unit, this part of Deuteronomy is actually very famous. Why is it famous? Because out of context, yes, sorry, Gloria. It's Philip's Torah portion. That's why. That's right. As Gloria says, it was Philip's Torah portion. No, Sam's Torah portion was Achrei Mot, but Philip's was Ki Tavo, was my sister's Torah portion. This is a portion which we actually read. So yes, it was Philip's portion, but it's also a portion that we read every year at Passover. It actually makes up a good chunk of the Passover Magid section, the part that a lot of people skip over. But they skip over it at their own peril, because what it really is that Midrash, that follows that text, this text, is an explanation of every word of this text. Because here's where it says, actually, this is not the part from Passover yet, but here's how Kitavo begins. Kitavo, vahaya kitavo. When you enter the land that your God Adonai is giving you as a heritage and you possess it and settle in it, which again, by the way, those kind of words are right here too, right? When God grants you safety from your enemies. So this is, again, in the future, when you come into that land, you possess it, you shall take from some of every first fruit of the soil, which you harvest from the land your God Adonai is giving you, put it in a basket, and go to the place where your God Adonai will choose to establish the divine name, which is a very, very obvious reference to Jerusalem. As you said, Deuteronomy never calls it out as Jerusalem, but when it says you only do it in one place and you go to the place that God has rested, that is the temple, and that is the very clear indication. Don't offer sacrifices any other place. And you shall go to the priest in charge at that time and say to him, I acknowledge this day before your God, Adonai, that I have entered the land that Adonai swore to our fathers to assign us. And so when you go to the priest, you say these words, Hayom, this day, I've entered the land that Adonai has given us. Now, what's interesting about this, you didn't just do it once. You didn't do it one time. You actually go back to that moment that you came into the land and you repeat this to some extent by reaffirming your connection to the land and saying, this is the land that God has given us. God swore it to our ancestors. The priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down in front of the altar of your God Adonai. And then it says, you shall then recite as follows before your God Adonai. And this is the section that we do at Passover. So all the stuff we just read is the preamble, and it's the setup for, and it's not just a preamble, it's actually the ritual. It's the ritual that we do. But the text that comes now is what you're supposed to say when you do that ritual. But we take it in the Passover story as an explanation, a one paragraph explanation for what happened to us. And of course, on Passover, what we're actually remembering. What are we remembering? And here's what it says, a summation of our experience. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to Adonai, the God of our ancestors, and Adonai heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. Adonai freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm, awesome power, and by signs and portents, bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land of flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore, I now bring the first fruits of the soil, which you, Adonai, have given me. And then it says, you shall leave it before your God Adonai and bow low before your God Adonai. But up to that end of that little monologue that you give, that's the part that we use for Passover. So we have what then follows is a midrash, an explanation of every word or every few words, an explanation for what these things mean. And the midrash actually, and I'll show you from the Haggadah, the midrash actually then brings in, it's a beautiful midrash. It's the big midrash here in the Haggadah. It actually shows us in a kind of a nutshell how midrash works. And let me just show you really quickly that that little bit there. So let me show you the Haggadah. I can show you any Haggadah, but let me just show you the Ashkenaz. This is the Magid. Here it is. He puts down the cup from his hand and uncovers the matzah. Go and learn. Well, here's the different translation. Aramean was destroying my father, and he went down to Egypt. That's actually one reading of it, but it's one reading, which is an Aramean was, my father was either a wandering Aramean or an Aramean was destroying him. So it's either referring to Lavan or it is that he was a wandering Aramean, that Jacob was a wandering Aramean. There's two versions of that, by the way, in the Haggadah. So, so here it is. So, so what we have here is the Midrash. So look what happens. He went down to Egypt, right? All the two words, Vayered Mitzrayma. This is a Midrash on it. They brought in a line from Genesis. Here's the next line, small number, two words. This is they quote Deuteronomy. So every time you have a Midrash, every time you have an explanation of a couple of the words, the rabbis bring in another quote from the Bible. Right? So this is considered, this is what Midrash does. Brings in other parts of the Bible and explains the Bible itself with other parts of the Bible. This is a perfect example. I mean, this is a commentary on one word, Varav. This actually brings in Ezekiel, right? The section that we were just reading. I told you when we were reading this a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, these lines from Ezekiel that talked about Israel being like a young woman that God has married, describing their breasts, you know. It's there, and it's also, I think it's later on here too, the references to Ezekiel, or maybe it's just that one. Seems like it's another one, but it's just that one. So again, you can see all these references to other parts of the Torah: Deuteronomy, Chronicles, Exodus. These are all, that's what Midrash does. It brings in other parts of the Bible as they're explaining it. So all of these things are this is the Midrash. This is the big part of the Haggadah, again, a part that a lot of people skip over. But it's all the commentary on this one section that we just read from Kitavo. So that is the that's the Kitavo section and the Midrash that accompanies it in Passover. So why this section? Why is this the section that the rabbis picked to do a commentary? If you see, if you look at this, it's a really good explanation for what happened to us. The Bible actually, right here in Deuteronomy, in one paragraph, explains how we got to Egypt, what happened to us when we were in Egypt, and then how God redeemed us. And so it's all there. It's all there in a few lines. Our experience of being captive, and redemption. So it's perfect for Passover. But look at the original context of it. The original context of it is the guy who's a farmer comes to God with his basket of fruit and says, God, remember what you did for us? Remember how you redeemed us? Well, you brought us to this land flowing with milk and honey, and now I'm bringing you produce from this land that you brought us to. And so originally, not talking about the Passover ritual usage of it, think about what's happening here, which is that the people are expressing their thanks for their harvest. They're thanking God for all the things that they have by recounting their history. Sound familiar to anybody? Okay. I'll ask another question. I'll ask in a different way. I can give you 2 clues. I'm going to give you the harder clue first.
Good clues.
It's not a Jewish holiday. Okay, now I'll give you the easy clue. It's only a month away. Month away.
Thanksgiving.
This is the original Thanksgiving ritual. And what do? When we do Thanksgiving, or at least when we used to do Thanksgiving, we would tell the story of the pilgrims. Right? Go watch Snoopy. No, we told the story when it was not deemed, some kind of weird historical revisionist on this was that, again, this was an example of, we tell the story of the first Thanksgiving of the pilgrims coming to this country, surviving that first winter and bringing their food together, and depending on the myth or the way that people told the story, but it was a foundational myth. It was a foundational story. They sat down with Squanto and the Native Americans, and they celebrated the fact that they survived in this country. So this is the original Thanksgiving ritual. And guess what? They knew it. The pilgrims knew this story. They loved this story. And to them, when they recreated this story, they were thanking God for the harvest and thanking God for the fact that they came to this new world. And they really saw it that way. So Thanksgiving was originally modeled to some extent, or thought of as the harvest holiday for the autumn, which was, of course, Sukkot. But the original pilgrims who tried to recreate that did that, and also to some extent brought in this tradition of thanking God for the harvest by reciting and recounting the history of how they got here. And so this is really a way of tying in the harvest with the historical, tale of how we got here. How did we get here? So it's a very powerful thing. And again, unfortunately, we've kind of uprooted it from the American tradition because, again, I don't know that Thanksgiving is like, I'm not even sure what schools do anymore with Thanksgiving, but the story was there to teach us that we're thankful for it. And to some extent, like, what people should do, at least on Thanksgiving, is acknowledge the fact that their families made it to this country. And when they're eating, at least at some point, think about how their own family made it to this country and are blessed to be able to be here and to be able to enjoy this land, which in a way, of course, is also flowing with milk and honey. And so we understand, like, oh yeah, I understand the need to do this because we do have a need to do this, acknowledging in our thanks the journey that we took to get to this place. So I think it's very important to take a moment to think about this, especially this time of year, and to think about this ritual that our ancestors had, which again, we recontextualize it around Passover, which was not the autumn harvest, but the spring harvest, but still with this idea that when we're thankful for a harvest, that we recount our history and we talk about how we got here. It's a very special thing. So it's a way of again doing this ritual. Now it says, a little bit more about this ritual. You shall enjoy together with the family of the Levite and the stranger in your midst all the bounty that your God Adonai has bestowed upon you and your household. When you've set aside in full the 10th part of your yield in the third year, the year of the tithe, and have given it to the family of the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, they may eat their fill in your settlements. You shall declare before your God Adonai, I have cleared out the consecrated portion from the house, and I have given it to the family of the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, just as you commanded me. I have neither transgressed nor neglected any of your commandments. I have not eaten of it while in mourning. I have not cleared out any of it while I was impure, and I have not deposited any of it with the dead. I have obeyed my God Adonai. I have done just as you commanded me. Now, does your commentary, Glory, say anything about that that's interesting?
No,
No?
there's no notes at all.
Okay, so part of this ritual of of bringing this food to the temple was also acknowledging that you've met your obligations to the poor, and that in addition to taking care of the priests, the Levites, or not really the priests, they're the Levites, that you've taken care of it. And again, up in Deuteronomy, we've had that a lot. The Levi, the Ger, the Yatom, the Almanah, Asher Bekir Becha. I mean, we have it all the time. Yeah.
We've never talked about it in class. We have not deposited any of it with the dead.
So if you look at the note, it's probably just going to say no part of the tithe may be left as food for the dead. So people had a ritual of giving food to the dead. It was very common. It was not encouraged. It was not something that the Jewish people were supposed to do. But what was really a problem was that in some cases, and I guess you could make the argument, you could see why, that the tithe, which is considered kind of like the holy part of what it's not your basic sustenance, right? Your tithe is the stuff that you make sure you cover the poor, you cover the stuff for God, the Levites, you cover the obligations that you have to your community out of it. Definitely don't want to use any of that for the dead. You're not supposed to do you're not supposed to leave anything for the dead. But I have a feeling that it was so common and it was so prevalent that they couldn't they couldn't say, well, you left some of your food to the dead.
I mean, we still do it.
Yeah, but we're not supposed to. Yes, we're not supposed to. Yes, people. That's not, yeah. John, eating Brent's is a holy obligation. He does not want to miss an opportunity. But no, for people who pour a little of their malt liquor down on the ground, that's the offerings to the dead. Look, it's a very common. It was a very common thing. The Egyptians did it. The Canaanites did it.
I'm saying
People still do it. Yeah, it's still part of, especially Day of the Dead rituals.
You're gonna say most of Mexican Catholics.
Yeah. So the Dias de la Muerte, which is coming up, to be honest, soon. Yeah, go see the movie Coco. Coco, they're giving food to his family members. No, they take this seriously. And again, it's because they do it in Asian cultures. The idea that you're giving something to your ancestors, it's part of ancestral worship culture where you provide some food for them and they can get it in the spirit world. So it's that's just like it's a common cultural issue. So yeah, we're not supposed to, but definitely don't use that. Don't use the tithe stuff. It's an example of like what we read before, which last week, which was don't use the money from your prostitution to give to the temple either. I mean, look, if you have that kind of money lying around, we're not real happy that you've got that money at all, but don't bring that money to the temple. Now, again, it's all money. It's all messed up. It's all moved together, but I guess, don't take the dollar bills that you just got at the strip club and bring them that day to the temple. Don't bring us those dollars. I don't know that that's the best analogy, but that's kind of the analogy. So it's not doing that stuff. Yeah, Glory, you just say.
You'd asked me if there was a reference to talking about verse 12.
Yeah.
In a different area on Deuteronomy 14. You want to read that?
Yeah.
Taken together, the two passages suggest the following. Annually, 1/10 of all Israelite produce was to be taken to the city of the central sanctuary for distribution to the Levites. At that time, at an initial festival, all Israelites ate part of this tithe. The rest, which would be by far the major part of it, belonged to the Levites. Every third year, the tithe was gathered in the towns and stored for distribution to the Levites and the less fortunate, aliens, fatherless, and widows.
Yeah, here's the line right here, because it was in ours too. So if you look at the note, I just opened it up. In the third year, the year of the tithe. So this is, again, every third year you shall bring out the full tithe of the year of your yield for that year, but leave it within your settlements. Then the family of the Levite, right? Those people get to have it. So yeah, that's the original, and we read that in Parshat Re'eh. That is the section right there. So yes, we had the same note, which is the note about the year of the tithe, the third year. So yeah.
Follow up to that, and this is the first time that I can remember that we're discussing something other than animals.
Oh, animal sacrifices? Yeah.
Right? So are we moving towards
No, we're not moving towards that, because in reality, what's interesting about the tithe and why this can be tithed is it's really hard to tithe a cow. It's not, you can kill it and cut it up, but in all seriousness, I mean, you can't really do that. And again, the priest did. I mean, there is like part of the priest ate and part that they offered up, but you can't really do that with your cow. You can do it with your crops. You take a tenth out, it's done. That's truma. That's to the priest. It's done. You can measure it out. I'll measure it out in 12 ounces. I got 12 ounces. It's very simple. I'm putting a, ounce and a half out to the priest. So it's easy with this stuff. So it's not really a sacrifice. This truma, this is actually maaser. This is the maaser tithe. It's still called truma, but it's really the maaser tithe, the 10th, the one that had to be a 10th. Yeah, I mean, this is grain. This was not couldn't really be done with the other stuff. Yeah. But again, yeah, they're not supposed to do anything else with it that would look bad, would be bad. And it's actually not the end of the statement you make. So you make a statement about how we got here, but you also make this statement about the truma itself. I've cleared out the consecrated portion. Right from here. So here's the other part of it. Look down from your holy abode, from heaven, by the way, and bless your people, Israel, and the soil you've given us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Yeah. As you swore to our fathers. So, yeah, so that's kind of a blessing for today. It's a blessing asking God to bless us from heaven, right? To bless us bless our land, bless our people. Any notes about that? Because that's what it does say. I mean, it says the nation of Israel and the land of Israel. The land, say the land of Israel. It doesn't need to. It says in the land. So bless the people and bless the land. Yeah. Your God Adonai commands you this day to observe these laws and rules. Observe them faithfully with all your heart and soul, right? B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha. You have affirmed this day that Adonai is your God, in whose ways you will walk, and whose laws and commandments and rules you will observe, and whom you will obey. And Adonai has affirmed this day that you are, as promised, God's treasured people who shall observe all the divine commandments. And that's the phrase, Am Segula, the treasure to God, the treasure nation to God. Am Segula. So we refer to ourselves not as the chosen people, but as a treasured people. It is, of course, that's contingent on us observing the divine commandments. technically kol mitzvotav, all the commandments, not just the ones we decide we want to keep. So the being a treasured people is contingent on that. It's contingent on that because it doesn't exist without that, right? God's treasured people who will observe all the commandments. Does your note there say anything about that, Gloria? Interestingly? What?
It just tells me, let's see, Exodus 19:5.
Really? I don't think that's our note here. No, it's not. So, well, Exodus 19:5 is right before we get the 10 Commandments, where God essentially is telling us we're gonna do these commandments.
It says there, that you will be my treasured possession. I mean, if you keep my covenant.
Yeah, that's right before we get the 10 Commandments. So, that's the way it's describing the relationship that we have with God, which is, yeah, you get to be the treasured people for God, but you have to observe the commandments.
Okay. It says all divine commandments, all divine commandments in Deuteronomy, or?
Well, what's interesting? It doesn't actually say, did yours say divine commandments? Does yours say divine commandments, Glory?
It says, now if you obey, you fully and keep my covenant.
That's weird. Because that's definitely not the word. It's definitely mitzvot, but it doesn't say divine commandments.
It's not like the commandment from Deuteronomy.
Well, that's a good question. So Mike is asking, is it referring to Deuteronomy? Is it referring to every commandment that's in the whole Torah? Look, well, what does it say?
The covenant between God and Israel at Mount Sinai is the outgrowth and extension of the Lord's covenant with Abraham and with his descendants 600 years earlier.
Well, that's nice. That's nice. I mean, it's saying it's a continuation of the covenant that God made with Abraham when there weren't.
Again, it goes back to.
Yeah, but that's a Christian Bible that said
I
that.
understand. All goes back to Noah and his idiot.
Noah's family. No, well, the covenant, or at least this promise that to be God's people, goes back to Abraham. The Torah portion that we're reading this week, Parshat Lech Lecha from Genesis, where it says, those who bless you will be blessed, and those who will curse you will be cursed. Genesis chapter 12, another appropriate thing to remember right now. By the way, I apologize, Schulman's. I just saw your note about the Elijah ritual for Passover. Going back to Passover for just a quick moment. The interesting thing about the Elijah ritual that we do at Passover, though, is that is more looking forward than looking back. If you think about it, the Passover rituals that we have, a lot of them are looking back. The Elijah ritual is definitely looking forward and asking for, again, either the Messianic era, Messianic age, the Messiah, the time when there'll be peace. We say Elijah is going to be the announcer of that. We also want to remind people that the text that we say when we open up the door is not the same as the text for Elijah. It's actually a slightly conflated text. The Elijah text welcoming Elijah is really not the text. Since we just looked at it, just look at it real quick. The Haggadah real quick one more time. If we look at the end of this part right here, it says, we pour out the cup for Elijah and open the door. Now, you and I, we always do Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, right? Bimhera v'yamenu, come to us, Elijah, come to us and bring us the Messianic era, right? Quick in our times. Okay. Let me show you what the Haggadah actually says. This is the traditional Haggadah. So after the third cup, right? You've already seen the top, but we pour the cup of Elijah and we open the door. And this is what we actually say. Pour your wrath upon the nations that do not know you, and the kingdoms and on the kingdoms who did not call upon your name, since they have consumed Yaakov and laid waste his habitation. Pour out your fury upon them, and the fierceness of your anger shall reach them. You shall pursue them with anger and eradicate them from under the skies of the Lord. That's the actual Elijah text. So interestingly, Schulman's, you just had me share with you what we actually did when we opened up the door. We don't do that anymore. Yes, you drank the wine.
I was a kid.
When you were a kid, yeah.
It's like,
And then you drink it. Mike pulled a fast one on his grandparents. That's nice. No, listen, he's a kid, but he doesn't drink anymore. So it's not like he drank a lot before. I mean, I'm going to imply that was like his beginning of his alcoholism. But anyways, the real text here is not as messianic and as hopeful or as uplifting, maybe. It's pretty brutal. And the reason is because Jews did not open up the door to let in Elijah. They opened the door to let God out. What we just did on Passover up until that point is invoke the God who struck the firstborn of the Egyptians. Maybe a little of that energy is floating around the house right now. And maybe if we get God good and riled, God will go out and destroy all of our enemies who right now, at any moment, were ready to attack us. And I don't mean like theoretically. I'm talking about every Jew that lived in a shtetl for hundreds of years. And every Jew that was accused of a blood libel this time of year. And when we opened the door to, on one hand, show the Gentiles that we were not slaughtering Christian babies for our matzah, which they lied about and would say, we'd also then say, God, please destroy them. This is the ultimate, John can't take it anymore. This is the ultimate utterance, by the way, of a people that are completely powerless and can't defend themselves. God, please take care of them because we can't take care of them. And that's one of the reasons why we also don't say this anymore. Because however you want to understand it, God has definitely placed within our power the arsenal to take care of ourselves now. So, oh yeah, they still say it. I never was raised saying it, ever.
Remember, I'm 80, we said it.
It's a scary thing. It's a scary power where you're now asking God to go out and take care of your enemies. But again, it's a reflection of people who couldn't do it themselves. So this is what we did as the part of the ritual. And then we start singing happy songs. We sing the Hallel and we sing, we sing and we do those kind of things. And there you can see in the Haggadah, this is the traditional Orthodox Haggadah, all the great songs we sing.
Not from Ralph's.
This is not the Ralph's Haggadah. Well, actually, parts of it are. I mean, it's not just the full. This is the full. We're going to do Adir Hu and this, and then we're going to come to the end, and we're going to get Chad Gadya right here. That's it, Chad Gadya, and that's the last thing, with the exception. Actually, this one doesn't even have Lashana Haba Yerushalayim, but most Haggadahs finish with that. So that's the Passover ritual was kind of taking care of business, if you will, when it came to Elijah, and looking forward to a time when we wouldn't have to be afraid, when we wouldn't, however you want to look at it, it was God saying, or us saying to God, hey, let's make sure we don't have to worry about this anymore. So, there's a lot of stuff that rings true right now. A lot of stuff that we're thinking about right now.
That's why we read, the Torah. The Torah
Yeah.
every year.
not think about the Amalekites as much as I did this year. So, yep. And then this chapter ends with the words, you have affirmed this day that Adonai is your God, in whose ways you will walk, whose laws and commandments and rules you will observe, and whom you will obey. And Adonai has affirmed this day that you are, as promised, again, treasured people, observe the commandments. And here's the very last thing, and that God will set you in fame and renown and glory, high above all the nations that God has made, and that you shall be, as promised, a holy people to your God, Adonai. Now, this is a little different than what we read before. This isn't Am Segula. This isn't a treasured people. This is a holy people to God, and that God will place us, again, high above the nations that God has made. That's a translation. What is glory? What does your translation have? 19.
He has declared that he will set you in praise, fame, and honor, high above all the nations he has made, and nations he has made, and that you will be a people holy to the Lord your God, as he promised.
And is there any commentary on that? And Mary, yours has pretty much the same translation, or fame and renown and glory? Honor, yeah.
It's still glory.
High above all the nations. Does it say high above all the nations in your translation, Mary? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the translation of Elyon, which is, yeah. Yeah, so Gloria, what did it say?
There's no notes.
There's no notes.
No.
They're basically saying, we don't have anything to say about this. Look, you know, this is a good example of doing good and having good things, you know, in as a possibility. Look, if Deuteronomy was written as late as we think it is, that means that people still thought that that could happen, even as the risk of being destroyed or being exiled lay out there, that God could still make us be a people that were, you know, an elevated people. Again, you know, this is somewhat contingent on our behavior, right? You know, observing all the divine commandments. Again, I don't know if it's, but and you juxtapose those two things, right? That we'll be an Am Segula, we'll be a treasured people, and we will be set high above the other nations. You know, this is finishes with the fact that you're an Am Kadosh, right? You're a holy people. It's not that you're, you know, the strongest nation, or that you're, you know, necessarily, wouldn't use the word better, but you're a holy people. You're a holy nation. So this is one of the kind of the hopes or the aspirations that we'd have as Jews, that we were not, you know, again, to some extent, not the most numerous, not the most powerful, but that we were a holy nation, that we would be treasured, that we'd be in this relationship with God where we understood that there was responsibilities, but that we got to be a holy people, a nation of priests, as it says in Leviticus, Goy Kadosh, and it says a nation of Kohanim. So, I mean, we have priests, but we're like priests to the rest of the world as a nation. So we have our own priests, but for the rest of the world, they look to us like we're the priests, as every Jew is a priest to some extent. This is the hope that we would have. This was the, you know, this was the you know, that was the hope that we were gonna have. the next chapter, which we're not going to start chapter 27 today, only because, and we will be in person next Wednesday night, not Tuesday, but Wednesday. Right. And then, next Wednesday, we will be in person on Wednesday night. But what's interesting about this is that this is also another ritual or another action that took place in chapter 27. But I do want to show you one other thing as we're, again, talking about this. What does this mean here in Deuteronomy? Is to look back and to just go back quickly to, again, this week's Torah portion, which is in Genesis chapter 12, where we first meet Abraham, right? Go forth from your native land, right? From your father's house to land I will show you. And it's verse 2 that says, I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And you shall be a blessing. Lechilah, right? I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So this is what Abraham is told at the very beginning. We don't know anything about him. We don't know anything about Abraham. We don't know anything about him. This is the first time we meet him. And it says literally there. And again, all it says is that, he was, Terach took his son out. That's the first time we see his name, actually. To be fair, this is the first time we see his name right here. Terach lived 70 years and he begot Avram. This is chapter 11. This is the genealogies, right? So this is the first time we actually see his name. No explanation other than they started a journey during his father's time, which is interesting, by the way. But here it says that Avram is told to go to the land that I will show you. And that's all we know. We don't know why. We don't know why Avram finishes this journey that his father started. We really don't know. But we do know what is in store for him if he, again, if he does it. And this is what he's told. So I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. So it's an interesting thing to think about because, how do people read that and how do they make sense of that? Well, look, Christians come up to me all the time and say, I bless the Jewish people. I don't need to know what they're talking about. I know what they're talking about. They're talking about chapter 12. Because if they bless the Jewish people, the Bible says they get blessed. So if you are following the Bible carefully, and you just saw that, well, I want God to bless me. I for sure want, what do I do? What do I do? Well, bless the Jewish people. And so I get that all the time from Christians. Yeah. This is a way for people who are not Jewish to feel, if they follow the Bible, that they can be blessed. Now, you can laugh at that. You can say, it's kind of obscure, kind of weird. And then you can understand that people who curse you will be cursed. Well, that's kind of weird because how would somebody ever read this also and say, well, I'm going to curse the Jewish people because, some other passage of the Bible, curses them. But it says pretty much here that you don't curse the Jewish people. Otherwise, you're going to be cursed by God. So at least on the face of it, it seems pretty clear. How did Christians in other times read this and not catch that? I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough one, but it also becomes an example of self-fulfilling words from the Bible, which are, you can read in the Bible lots of different things and decide which things you want to follow. Thankfully, we live in a time when a lot of Christians will read this and take it to heart and believe it. There are parts of the Christian Bible where Jesus curses the Jews. And so when you wonder, how could they be cursed at all? It's because of that. Again, it's definitely read differently today by most churches than it was for the last 2,000 years, but a lot more Christians will quote this. how could a Muslim curse the Jewish people and think they're going to get away with that? God said they don't read the Bible. Quran doesn't say that. Quran doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say you have to bless the, there's lines in the Quran that say we protect, we protect the people of the book, but it doesn't say anything about blessing them. It doesn't say anything about, it doesn't say anything about cursing them. As a matter of fact, and again, I don't want to get people riled up. It's not the purpose of today, but I definitely wanted to show you what the Houthis in Yemen, who, according to what we saw this week, maybe tried to attack Israel with drones and missiles, which doesn't really make sense. But if they really did it, the United States actually knocked them down. But the Houthis are in charge of what used to be North Yemen, but it's part of Yemen, the capital in Sana'a. But this is their flag. This is the Houthi flag. This is their flag. They have 5 lines of Arabic, 2 lines in green. Those are the good lines. The red lines are thou shalt nots, or bad, right? That's why it's in red, because green means go, even in Islam. No. But here's the words. This is how he translates. Allahu Akbar, right here. It's Allahu Akbar. God is great, right? Death to America. Well, that's that line. Death to Israel. Ooh. And then cursed be the Jews. Of course, the last line is victory to Islam. Folks, this is a flag. This is a flag of the Houthis. I mean, these are the people who are now in charge of millions of Muslims in predominantly Shia Muslims in Yemen today. This is their flag. This is the Houthi flag. You're on the flag, man. Cursed be the Jews is on the flag. It says Israel, but it also says the Jews. So understand that when the people were running through Kibbutz Be'eri in the music festival in Israel, they weren't saying death to Israel. They were saying death to Jews. That's what they were saying. So again, it's hyperlink on that. It's pretty much as anti-Semitic as you can get. That's their flag, folks. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, you look up, I can just show you. This isn't Wikipedia. Look up the Houthi flag, man. There it is. Flag of the Houthis. You're on the flag. It's not like they have another flag. That's their flag. I mean, there it is written out for you in English, so you can see. So, yeah, that's the flag. So, the literal curse the Jews this isn't some hypothetical thing that, isn't it weird that somebody wrote 2,000, in this case, 2,700 years ago in the Bible, or in the case of Genesis, 2,800 or 2,900 years ago. People, why would somebody bless or curse the Jews? They still do it. People who are still doing it. The good side is that we live in a country that, for the most part, your neighbors, at least your neighbors here, are going to be on the blessing side. But when you got somebody walking down, Fifth Avenue in New York saying curse the Jews, there are a few Jews in New York. I don't know if you knew that, but there's quite a few of them there. And that's what they decided to do today. So, that's still, well, he's not in the city. But he's still. I actually was texting him about something else, but he didn't say anything about it. We were exchanging, so he was basically telling me, that's what I was going to tell you. He's coming on the 15th. So that's what we were talking about. But we didn't talk about the Israel stuff, about Ronnie. Ronnie and Phyllis are going to be here on the 15th. Does Prager have anything to say about what we read today? Was Prager on anything about Amalek, out of curiosity?
Nothing too much about the Amalek. Kind of went away from that. He went as deep as you did. I like the points you made on it though. It reminded me of some funny things when you mentioned the inside and outside one. I remember this wasn't in response to the recent conflict, but it was like, I want to say 5 to 6 years ago. I remember hearing about the Jews for Palestine movement. That was the funniest thing. And you said people self-hating on the inside. I'm like, yeah, you can't get more self-hating than that.
Yeah.
Besides holding a pride parade in Gaza, I guess that's a good way.
Yeah,
to say it.
that was the joke that actually, we saw one of those signs at the, at a rally for Israel was like, queers for Palestine is like chickens for KFC. That was the sign that was going around. But look, this issue of destroying Amalek is an interesting one, right? But it's a tough one because again, you're destroying you're destroying a whole group, but you're really not, because what Amalek is the concept of unfounded and baseless anti-Semitism, and that you're supposed to destroy. You can't tolerate it. You can't say, well, maybe it'll go away. Or you can't say, well, we can't do anything about it. Because if you don't do anything about it, it's going to manifest itself on a rampage. You can't just say, well, there's nothing. So you either can do something about it, or you better be prepared to defend yourself from it.
Wasn't Amalek a bit different though? Because he never said that he hated us. He just sounded like he was an opportunistic predator. Because he just saw some people walking in the desert and thought, hey, this will be an easy pick. And then started attacking us as we walked through the desert, which it's not defending him, but it's making him sound even worse because it makes him sound like a vulture.
There's no question that
he attacked the weakest part of a wandering party in the desert. So you take the weakest of the weak.
There is no question that historically and maybe like accurately of depicting what Amalek was, you're absolutely right. Desert band of raiders that were just despicably, cowardly to do that.
I've talked a lot with, I guess, about Jews to other people, because none of my friends are Jewish, but we've not that you're talking about the non-tolerating stuff, and I talked about it with my friend in terms of religious-based violence to either of us, and since he's military, he talks about that a lot in terms of response with overwhelming violence and aggression. Because like if someone tries to threaten you, you don't just laugh it off, right? Like when America was fighting Iraq in the Gulf War, we didn't just take a couple pot shots at them. We ran the highway of death, shot anybody who moved on their highway, went right up to Baghdad and said, "You do this one more time, and we'll burn Baghdad." Right? So it's you meet aggression with overwhelming force. You don't just go, oh, maybe if we just, form a coalition party with the Nazda and let them, run Germany, they'll be nice. No, you don't do that.
Yeah. And so what we're talking about is not a people, but a concept, or what we actually have to be careful of is not, again, a genetic component, but for people to, when they see anti-Semitism, to make sure that they confront it, and we don't back down from it, and we don't assume that it's going to go away. And again, it's not the people, it's the concept, or more importantly, the way that that's put into effect, because we can't get into someone's mind. We can't say, oh, well, they're
not even necessary. And the Torah never cares about that either. It never cares about what you think. It cares about what you do. And once you put
that in action, but you know what, listen, what is an action, right? It's not, an action isn't, I thought about it. An action is when people walk through a street and go, kill the Jews. That's an action, right? So when someone verbalizes it, we take them at their word. We say, well, they said they were going to kill me. So we don't say it, well, because the person said it, or thought it, but because they've said it, and they've said it vocally, or they've said it, they drove through
you can perceive that as a threat, and most good places in America will consider that relative self-defense. If someone verbalizes a threat to you and you act on it, they consider that self-defense.
So that's what we're talking about in action. What do you mean?
You can't just saying, be careful what you're espousing in regards to how you react.
No, but
no, clearly hypothetical.
Because I come at you and say I don't like you for whatever reason. Doesn't give you
no, that's not what we're saying. But if somebody says death to the Jews, or I'm going to kill the Jews, we don't say, well, they didn't really mean it. They're saying it hypothetically.
Your argument is incitement of violence. Nobody knows that more than I do, but anyway, we have a small group of people that are listening, but you have to be careful.
I agree, but we're not encouraging people to go out and uproot all the violence that's out there, and or a violent intent that's out there. But on the other hand, I mean, we can't assume that we can't assume that we can't take, we don't take it seriously. So look, yeah, and I am far more careful today than I was a month ago. I'm looking around a lot more. I'm making sure my door is locked. Things that I'm sometimes lazy about. I'm not, because I know that we're living in a time right now where people have been hyped up to do violence against me, and I take it seriously. So I don't, I'm not saying I'm being hyper vigilant or I'm asking for a fight, but I am more careful right now than I sometimes am.
And you should be, because you're a public figure.
So, and anybody can find your address now. Anybody can. So
come, baby. Come.
All right, everybody, stay safe, stay positive, and we will see you guys. We'll see those who are online. We'll see you next week, but stay good, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good luck, guys.
See you, Shulmans.
Bye.
Bye.